everyone, it's Mary, and today I'm finally filming my best books that I read in 2020. 2020 was, as a reading year, sort of weird, as it was in general. I feel like I'm pretty pleased with how many books I read, because I ended up reading 57 books, which is, more than the previous years. But I did not read a lot of 5-star reads, so I guess I'm happy about my reading year, but that tells me that I should pick the books that I want to read a little bit better, and that's definitely one of my goals for 2021. So I included in this list books that I gave 4 stars to, and of course books that I gave 5 stars to, just because I was looking at the list of the books that I read last year, and I just thought I'd talk about the books that still speak to me and stand out the most. And all the 4-star reads that I gave, especially these 4-star reads that I gave, could easily be 5-star reads. So yes, let's not focus too much on star ratings. But I have to say that in this list, the books are in no particular order, but I did put the 4-star reads before, and I will work my way up to the 5-star reads, but none of these books are in order. So the last book that I'll be talking about is not the best book of 2020, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's just dive in and talk about the books. First up, we have Educated by Tara Westover, and this is a memoir of the author's upbringing in rural Idaho. She was born to a Mormon family, and the parents were very radical and got, over the years, more and more secluded from society. They didn't believe in institutions such as the school, the hospital. They didn't use medicine. Even in cases of serious illness or serious accidents, they experience a lot of car accidents that are very severe, but they don't go to the hospital. She didn't have a birth certificate. They were sort of homeschooled on paper, but in reality they weren't. They were very much neglected, and she endures abuse, both physical and mental, I would say, especially perpetrated by her father and one of her older brothers, but really by everyone in the family. She had the courage to remove herself from the situation, to leave everything and everyone behind, to pursue what was her main drive in life, and she wanted to get an education, and that's just what she does. And I think this was very fascinating and interesting to read. It is well written, and the author stands out as being very objective, despite the memoir being very subjective, of course. I mean, a memoir is subjective anyway, but she did state in multiple instances of the book how she wasn't even sure that's just how the events went, or that's just how she remembers them. And sometimes even within the family they wouldn't agree on how an event really occurred. So, and she states that, but despite that, it stands out as being very sort of objective, although she's not very distanced from the situations that she describes, being her still very young. So you need to keep that in mind going into this one. But this was definitely worth the hype. Next up, we have Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, and I read this, I started reading this in the a little bit before all the pandemic started, and I feel like it was very timely. This book is written by a surgeon, and he talks about his personal life, as well as his experiences at work regarding dying and just getting old. So he also talks about his father dying of brain cancer, so it sort of gets very personal as well. And he's just such a comforting voice, I would say, to be listening to. And it's I have to admit that this book could probably be a 5-star read, but due to the time in which I was reading, and I was actually listening to the audio for this book, which doesn't help for me, but when I was listening to it and all the pandemic started happening, towards the end of the book, I sort of lost my concentration a little bit, so I feel like I could get even more from this book reading it, maybe in paper form, and now that the times are a bit more, I would say, relaxed, you know, compared to March of last year. This could be a bit unsettling as a theme, but it's very eye-opening, and I felt like it was very important, even concerning the time in which I was reading it. It's not about a pandemic. As I said, it's about dying, especially of old age, but how we as a society have very much medicalized old age, and how, you know, the goal seems to be that you need to live as long as possible, whatever the conditions, disregarding the wishes and the will of the person in question. And he gives you a different perspective to think about, and how in the end what matters is not you know, how long you lived, but what was the quality of your life. So this book sort of encourages you to have that kind of conversation, which is very important, and how important it is to plan in advance what to do should the situation occur. And yeah, so I think this book was very emotional and very important, and I really loved it. Next up we have How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. This again is a memoir. I feel like I have a lot of non-fiction in this list. I didn't check though. Well, in this coming-of-age memoir, he explores what it means to be a black gay man in the US. And it is split in 3 parts. First, we have his childhood, then his university years, and lastly, his sort of adulthood and where he is at now. It was very short, but very impactful. He writes in a very poetic way, since he is a poet. And you can definitely tell by, you know, by his writing style. It was really a nice book to be listening to as well. He narrates the audiobook himself, and I thought it was a great experience as an audio. And he's very honest and very vulnerable in this memoir. This memoir is also sort of a love letter to his mom, with whom he has sort of a complicated relationship anyway, but a very layered and complex one, and he's so good at detailing it throughout the book. So yes, I definitely recommend this one, but again, I recommend all the books, of course, that are in this list. Next up is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and I'm so pleased to be seeing this book in basically every best of 2020 books videos around, and this book was very again, very important and very honest. She is such an amazing writer, and aside from this memoir, I hope she keeps on writing, because you can tell that she was born to do this. She has such a way with words, and it gets in your skin in a very good way. She writes beautifully, and also her voice, because I listened to the audio for this one, her voice was very pleasant to be listening to again. And in the audiobook, well, I didn't even tell you what this book is about. Chanel Miller was the victim in the Stanford rape case, and she was raped by Brock Turner in a university campus. And in this memoir, she talks about this event, but also about her life in general and the aftermath, and it's just so well written and so all-encompassing. She's very detailed about what happens to her, and not in a, you know, sort of voyeuristic way, but in a very honest and urgent way that really leaves you sort of speechless. She has, as I said, such a way with words. You could definitely feel, I felt like this book was very relatable, even if you didn't have any sort of experience. It was just so easy to be in her, you know, in her place, in her mind. She talks about the procedures in court in the US, how hard it is to go through all of that, even, you know, for bureaucracy, but also mentally, it's just very draining. As I said, she doesn't shy away from details, but she's very clean cut and pristine in her way of telling you the story, and just puts her heart in your hands. And despite being about this such a heavy topic and being so you can feel how desperate and how impactful in a negative way this was and still is for her, but it's incredibly hopeful as well. And I just feel like I wish like she was my friend. She does sound like such an awesome person in general. Yeah, so this one was great. Next up we have The Body Never Lies by Alice Miller. This again is a non-fiction book, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book to everyone because it's very this could be I think classified as a self-help sort of book, but not really, because I feel like it's more of a self improvement. No, that sounds like a TV show. That's more of a self-awareness sort of book. I don't know how to describe that, but I feel like this talks about how trauma impacts, how childhood trauma impacts your entire life, how important it is to face the fact that your family might not be good for you in a more in a broader sense. It's not as brutal as that, as I said, but it's just how it explains to you the importance of childhood trauma, which is not only a single event that happened that had you traumatized, but sometimes it's something repetitive that a sort of neglect that keeps happening, especially in the earlier years of your life where you don't have memory but your body has. And how some mental issues and some even physical issues are caused really by you not wanting because nobody wants to to live that again. You cannot remember, but your body keeps telling you that there was something wrong, that is now still unresolved, and if you don't resolve it, you will still be sick, basically. That's the gist of it. But I think it's very important it could be very impactful for a lot of people to just have the permission to say, I don't love you because you didn't love me when I needed it. I don't need you and I don't forgive you. And sometimes, especially in this sort of in a Christian society, and I'm talking of course about my society, I'm not talking about all the world, but in a Christian society, forgiveness seems to be the key to heal. But it's not really true. It doesn't mean, this book doesn't mean that you need to just cut your ties with your family or with one of your parents. It just means that you need to cut those, even just mentally. It doesn't mean that you don't need to see them anymore and you don't have to interact with them anymore. But it means I have the permission not to love you because you didn't treat me, because you didn't love me, because you mistreated me. And I can say I don't forgive you. We will keep living our lives, but I don't forgive you. So I feel that this book could be very important for that reason. But it's sort of a, I'm a bit on the fence with recommending this book to just everybody. I would select the people to hand this book to, but definitely check it out if it sounds like something that could help you and could be impactful for you as well. Just a quick note, I had to stop the video because I ran out of time, so now it's another time in which I'm completing the filming of the video, so the lighting is different. I don't know if the frame is gonna be the same. You can probably hear my son playing, and I hope I can manage to get on with the video anyway. So we were saying, next up is another book that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to everyone, but I had to include it because I gave it 5 stars and I really enjoy it. I think it's like on the specific topic it is about, it's just one of the best I've read, if not the best. And it is Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability by Beck. I just recently finished this one. I read I think now 3 books on bilingualism. I am raising my son as bilingual, and just if you are doing the same thing, I would highly suggest you pick up this one because it's the right amount of information, but also tools and strategies to actually raise your child as bilingual in everyday life without it being a chore, without using some sort of techniques that I don't agree with, like lying to your child, like tricking him into, you know, talking the target language that I don't really sit well with. This one was amazing. Next up, this is a reread, but honestly I wanted to include this book in this list just because I never included it before. It's the 4th time, well, the fourth year in a row in which I am rereading The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The first time I read this one, I gave it 4 stars, and then from the second time on, it was a 5-star read for me. And I never included this in any list just because I think the first time that I gave 5 stars to this one, I didn't do any sort of best of that year. So I just thought I'd include it somewhere because that's easily become one of my most favorite books of all time. It's just so cozy to read. I think it's perfect during the summer. I think the structure of this book is perfect. How it develops, just the right depth to the character, the right amount of plot to keep you engaged. It's definitely a classic for a reason. I'm of course planning to reread this one in August again, and I also decided that I'm going to purchase a new edition every year. Just decided I'd treat myself to that, even though it's very unnecessary. But I think I have the collector sort of inclination for a lot of things, and I am a bit obsessed with book covers and book editions, so yeah. Then we have Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This is the second book that I read by her, and I think she's going to be one of my favorite authors of all time, just because, you know, I agree that 2 books are not a lot, but both of them I really enjoyed, and I cannot wait to pick up more from her. This is a historical fiction set in the 1800s in London. And we have Sue Trinder. She is an orphan, and she is raised in this family of thieves by Mrs. Saxby, that sort of her mother figure. She raises her as if she was her daughter, but she has, you know, quite a different childhood since she's in a house of thieves, and she from a very young age starts to steal and just do all sort of mischiefs. And one day a family friend comes along. He's called Gentleman, and he has a plan to sort of steal a fortune to this other young girl, because Sue is very young, is like 16, 17 when the story takes place. Gentleman wants to marry this girl that basically she's an orphan as well. She lives with her uncle, and when she gets married she will have access to a lot of just property and money, and he wants to get his hands on that, and he persuades Sue to help him out in this task by becoming her maid and her friend and just following along with the plan and the aftermath. And she agrees, and then we have our story. This is pretty chunky but very fast-paced, which doesn't mean, like, the beauty of Sarah Waters is that her books, at least not all of her books, now that I think of it, because the first one was not fast-paced, but this one, even though it's fast-paced, it's also very deep in terms of character study, character development. It's just, I think it's well balanced, and it keeps you interested, you know, all the way through. It's a page turner. It was a compulsive read for me, which is something that is not really happening lately. I don't feel like I'm picking up books that I really don't want to put down. Like sometimes I'm enjoying my read, but I'm not that, you know, in it as I was with this one. It kind of reminded me when I used to read as a teenager. She creates such a vivid atmosphere, and what also I like about her is that she is very good at describing scenes and just environment, settings, which is something that I really struggle with, but now I know that it's because of ADHD, but before I was, so if you have ADHD, this author, I would highly suggest this author, because she's just so good, and I can imagine everything when I read, which is something that rarely happens for me in books. I have a very hard time with description of environments in general, but yes, this one. Then I'm going to mention 4 books which consist of the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante. And this series, I mean, I know that it's 4 books, so maybe it's cheating, I don't know, but since I didn't give 5 stars to all of them. Some of them were 4, some of them were 5, but as a whole, the series for me is a 5-star read. This is the story of Lenou and how she grows up in poverty in Naples. Really it spans all her life, because when the book opens, she's talking about herself, and she's in her 60s, and she's just, you know, talking about her life. So she goes back in time to tell you all that happened to her, and especially tied to her relationship and friendship with Lila, another, you know, a friend of hers. That's very sort of mysterious, it's a very strong character. They both have a strong character, actually. And I think their friendship and just their relationship throughout all these years is depicted beautifully. I love how she writes. This one as well was such a compelling read. I could not put this book down. It was a little bit past the whole pandemic situation, and it was just such an escape for me, and I'm so glad that I found one of my favorite authors now, because I just want to read everything that she puts out and everything that she wrote previously, because that's the only series that I read. The only, you know, books that I read by her are these, and I definitely want to check out more of her work. It just was very human, very also relatable, because I feel like I had a relationship, well, a friendship with that could not really mirror the ones that the protagonists have, because it's very peculiar, I would say. But some of the dynamics, I think she pinpoints exactly what it means to have a conflicted and a complex friendship with someone else, and how this affects your life, how you view yourself, and also very raw, and doesn't, again, shy away from you know, bad things that happen, and unfortunately is very believable as well, given the context. I absolutely would recommend this series to everybody. That's one of the books that I would, you know, push into the hands of everyone. That's what I did, at least with this one. And I'm so proud that she's Italian, actually, because I don't read a lot of Italian books. So yeah, this one. Lastly, we have another memoir, which is Heavy, an American memoir by Kiese, Laymon. This book was, I think now it's become one of my favorite books of all time, to be honest. I read this twice because I listened to the audiobook, which was very interesting, but I also read the ebook. Then I bought the physical copy, which I plan to rereading as well. But I read it 2 times, because the first time, as I said, with the audio, sometimes I find myself really having a hard time paying attention, especially with him and his way of speaking, his slang, and all the things that he said were so concise, but yet so intense and impactful, that I needed to be reading the things that he said by myself at my own pace, and just to be able to reflect on them, because they were just so layered and just so thought-provoking. So I enjoyed myself listening to this, but also I'm glad that I read it in physical form. Kiese is a college professor, and again, this talks about his life, basically, his growing up and being black in America, and being overweight, and just the heaviness of it all, not only, you know, weight-wise, but with all that it means to be black and to be big, you know, not only overweight, but big, in a society where black people are targeted just for being black. The more space you take, the more, you know, likely it is to get noticed and to be a possible target for, you know, police brutality, or just, you know, as someone that someone else could be afraid of just because they're black, just because he is black and big. And also all the things I had to endure, the abuse, the difficult relationship with his family as well, his mother in particular, which makes me sort of think of, again, how we fight for our lives. I think these two go well together, even though they're very different and they have like sort of even a different tone. I really liked the tone of this one. It was very much, I felt privileged to be able to get a glimpse of what it means as an outsider. This book is written for black people. It's not a book that, you know, gives you a hand as a white, you know, person and says, here, I want to explain to you what it is like. It's very much an own voices for own voices. And to be able to witness this, I feel like I need to thank him. That's it. The way in which this one is written, again, as it talks about relationships, it touches upon a lot of heavy topics such as gambling and addiction and sex. And again, this one is very raw, also very beautiful. The language he used, I think, was impeccable. I just love this one so much. And yeah, definitely recommend this one to everybody. That's it for today. I hope this is not gonna be too long, and I hope that the second part doesn't clash too bad with the first part. But please let me know what were the best books for you of the worst year, I would say, what you enjoyed, if you read any of the books that I mentioned today, and we can chat in the comments. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!